Good morning, everyone. I want to say hello to all of you, to thank you that you came to connected to us and to hear this amazing lecture that we're going to have today. This lecture is organized together with the National Agency for Academic Exchange. We did this lecture together with Mrs. Małgorzata Matysik, who is a lecturer of Polish language at the Tel Aviv University, and also in cooperation with Dr. Dorota Burda-Fischer from Haifa University. So we have here also students of Polish language at both Tel Aviv and Haifa University, and also students of Polish language at the Polish Institute, and also our Polish-speaking large community in Israel, and parents of Polish-speaking kids from Polish school in Tel Aviv. So hello, everyone. And we invited to give this lecture Dr. Aneta Nott-Bower from Poland, but currently living in Great Britain. And she's a great specialist of bilingualism of kids and also adults. And she will give us a very great scope of issues and challenges and all the things that that bilingual person should know. So good morning and welcome, Aneta.
Thank you very much. Once again, hello from Manchester in England. I've got a very nice cup of tea here because it's a little bit cold and gloomy outside. So I can see on some of your pictures that it's nice and bright where you are. So I do envy you. It must be beautiful to see sunshine and being able to have such a nice bright view out of your window. So I will be charging my batteries, looking at your sunshine, and I will try and share some of my experiences in bilingualism, teaching bilingual children and adults, and also some science behind it. But I'm going to try and make it as easy and practical as possible, because I think this is what I'm specializing in, and this always been my ambition, to translate science into practical terms and to help people of all backgrounds to use this knowledge in their language learning. So I have prepared a presentation that will guide us here. So just give me a second to bring it up. So I'm hoping it's displaying correctly. Can you see it okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay, that's good. Thank you very much for the confirmation. So the topic today is bilingualism and the unique challenges of learning Polish as a heritage language. So I will be explaining all of the terms that are already here in the title, but my main objective today is to show it to you that it's much easier to learn Polish if you already heard it or experienced it earlier in life. So that's one thing. So I will encourage you to use the opportunities that will come from it. But also, I would like to make you aware that there are going to be some challenges that we all have to be prepared for. But obviously, I will also give you some solutions, some ways in which we can deal with those challenges. So hopefully, at the end of it, you will come out with some practical knowledge of the topic of bilingualism and how even considering ourselves bilingual will help in the learning process. So you will come out with this awareness, and also you will come out with some tools that will help you on your way in learning Polish or teaching Polish or refreshing your command of this language. So, first of all, a little about myself, because maybe you don't know me. My name's Aneta Nott-Bower, and I've been interested in bilingualism for over 20 years. I say that I live and breathe bilingualism because it's my true passion. I first discovered this topic when I was a student of speech and language therapy in Warsaw, and I was preparing to choose what to write my dissertation on. And obviously, it's a very wide area. I could have chosen anything, but so it happened that at the time I was already learning English. I was teaching English as well as a student job, and I was visiting England, and I discovered in one of the libraries the whole shelf dedicated to bilingualism. And at the time in Poland, it was a practically unknown subject. Also at my university. So this felt like a challenge. It felt like I should take it and bring it into the Polish science as well. So I was preparing my dissertation using the materials from the English-speaking world. And then I went on to do my doctorate also in bilingualism. I compared a group of but monolingual and bilingual children, and I tried to compare their ability of telling stories. So this is called a narrative. So I was testing their narrative skills and in Polish, but one group was Polish and English speaking children living in England, and the other group was Polish speaking children in Poland. And I'm very proud to say that the bilingual group did very well. There wasn't any main differences between those two groups. But there is something very important to mention. The bilingual group, apart from speaking Polish at home, they were also attending a Polish Saturday school here in Liverpool. So they had the experience, or a wider experience of using Polish apart from just the home environment. And the reason why I'm mentioning it, we will be speaking about it later on when we speak about Polish as a heritage language. Currently, I'm a lecturer at the Maria Grzegorzewska University in Warsaw, teaching bilingualism as well to future speech and language therapists. I teach bilingual children and adults at my own online practice called Bilingual House. I do talks and lectures like this, and I've also published 2 books on bilingualism. I'm a mother of adolescent bilingual children, so I think this has been the most important event when it comes to my career, that I became a mother, and I experienced all of the challenges of passing Polish to the next generation. I experience these challenges every day. Because I've been living in England for over 20 years. My husband's British, so I'm the only source of Polish language to my children in everyday life. And I'm very proud to say they are bilingual and biliterate and bicultural as well. And then again, my own bilingualism. So I will speak about it a bit more in a minute when I share my own bilingual story. But the reason why I wanted to introduce myself in such a way, because I want to prove it to you that I do not just study bilingualism from books. I actually experience it myself. So, welcome one more time to today's talk on bilingualism in the context of Polish as a heritage language. Why are we here today? We are here today because we will be exploring learning Polish for those who encountered this language in childhood alongside another language. So this is a classic example of a heritage language speaker, a person who's already had the experience of the language earlier or later in their life, but then as an adult, they want to refresh it, they want to develop it, they want to take it further, so it starts playing a wider role in their life. So we will discuss the unique aspects of this situation, what challenges it provides, but also opportunities of learning Polish as a second or heritage language. So a few words about my personal story about bilingualism, because I've already told you about my research. I told you about my children who are bilingual, but also I consider myself bilingual, and I want to share with you a story from when I was younger. So I grew up in Poland. At the time, it was a very monolingual and monocultural society. I've always loved languages, but first of all, I was only able to learn Russian at school. Later, I was 12 when the transformation in Poland happened. So when communism ended, and then I was able to learn Western languages as well. First of all, it was German. And later on, they added English as well. And this is when I fell in love with English. And personally, I don't blame myself, because that was the times of MTV. That was the times of when we were first able to watch Western movies on televisions or on video, and that language was simply fashionable. So I fell in love with that language, and unfortunately, I neglected my other languages, so my German and my Russian. Now, I'm much smarter than this, and I know that two languages are not enough nowadays. So I'm trying to refresh my German and my Russian. But I know for a fact that these languages will never be as close to me as English is, because English became more than a foreign language. And I know exactly when I first felt that I use English on more levels than you would expect from a proficient speaker of a foreign language. I began to feel that language. I began to experience it to experience it on cultural levels. I began to dream in that language. So this is when I felt there must be something more to it. But obviously, because I was very young at the time and I didn't even know what bilingualism is, I was just really happy that I'm going on another level in learning my second language. I had a favorite channel on television, which was called Travel Channel, because apart from learning languages, I also really dreamt about traveling. So I watched that channel with a passion, and at the time, and I think it's still the case in Poland, any programs that are not in Polish are translated. Don't know whether you've experienced it, in something called lector. So you would have a narrator speaking over the original dialogue or the original text of the program, and simultaneously you can hear what's underneath, so the original language and the narrator speaking Polish. So I was watching that program in that way because that's what was available. But the channel probably to cut costs, I imagine, later on at night, switched their translation off, and the programs were emitted in the original language version, which was English. And one night, when I was watching maybe one program on Thailand, another program was traveling around Africa, and then another program started, and I was halfway through it, and I realized that there is no Polish translation. That I'm watching it in original, which was in English, and I'm not even noticing it. So I didn't even notice the transition between Polish and English. So I thought to myself, there must be something more to it. And it made me very, very proud. And nowadays, when I work with bilingual people, I see it all the time, how they switch between languages without any hesitation, without any visible effort. Although we know that it will take a little bit of effort, and it's a very much of an active process. So as you can see in the picture here, we've got these two clouds that are separate on the two ends, and here in the middle they start to mix, overlap, interchange, and this is a very good metaphor of bilingualism. That you've got these two very much active languages that seem separate on the surface, but underneath the surface, they would be very much affecting each other, a lot of the time interfering, but also sometimes they would be helping each other, because there will be also processes that they have in common and that they would share. So there are good and bad sides to it, but I think it's a very good metaphor of it. So when I'm speaking to you now in English, my Polish is active all the time, and I'm actively blocking it, so I don't, because I want to limit myself to one language, so it's easy for you to understand. So a few words about bilingualism. What's a classic definition, and what most people, everyday people not studying the topic, what most people believe, bilingualism is being fluent in two languages. And this kind of definition would concentrate on the level of competence. So we would imagine a bilingual person is fluent in two languages, so speaks those two languages to a very high degree. But what we believe in modern science is that the level of competence is not the most important thing. What's more important is effectively using two or more languages. So the more modern definitions would concentrate on usage. So on how well we can use the languages as tools for communication. So I would encourage you to internalize the modern definition, because it offers us many, many benefits. First of all, it includes more people. So for example, when I said to you that I consider myself bilingual, even though I started learning English late, even though my English is not perfect, it's because I believe in the modern definition, because I effectively use two or more languages. So I could converse and achieve certain goals in my communication in both Polish and English. And this is what differs my ability in English from my ability in German or Russian, that those are just foreign languages, and they don't fulfill all of my goals yet, I'm hoping. So what's very important to know about bilingualism It's that, first of all, it's a very wide area. And second of all, that it is very complex. So it will differ in each person. So, for example, we've got balanced bilingualism. So it's people who speak, so it's those perfect bilinguals. So people who speak two or more languages to a very high level. So in a way, it's two monolingual people in one person. But it's been proven on many occasions that in real life, it's very hard to find balanced bilinguals because most of the time, one language would be developed better than the other. Also, it will be constantly changing depending on the language environment, on the experiences, on the demands of their community. So it's very difficult to find such balanced bilinguals. Another term here in the field of bilingualism is a receptive bilingualism. So receptive bilingualism is the most fair way of describing what's traditionally known as passive bilingualism. But whenever I will use passive, I will always have to add these quotes because receptive bilingualism is not passive. So it's being able to understand the second language and struggling to speak in that language. So traditionally it's called passive because that person looks passive, how they understand the language, but the understanding of the language is not a passive process. There are many active processes happening in the brain at the time. You can even see sometimes how the person is focusing and is trying to decipher what we are telling them, and it's definitely not passive. So it's proven. But still, if you read about it or if you speak to people about it, you will hear they use that traditional term passive bilingualism. So we are aware of it, that it's not a passive process, it's receptive. Another way of looking at bilingualism is looking at it as a continuum. So a continuum would be a line. On one end, you would have the balanced bilingual, so that perfect image of a bilingual person. And on the other end of the spectrum, you would have a beginner bilingual. And I will describe that term in detail in a minute because I think it's also very useful. So first of all, I'm just signaling beginner bilingual, and on the other end is the perfect bilingual. And in the middle, on this line, we can place all of the different levels of bilingualism. And this is how we can embrace the whole group of people who can use two or more languages, obviously to different degrees. And that will also depend on the context, because sometimes people are proficient in a second language, but only in the field of their work because they work in that language. But if you ask them to speak about cinematography, for example, in that language, they will struggle. Or even something so simple as cooking. They will not have the right vocabulary to speak use that language, speaking about these topics that they are not familiar with. And that is completely natural and normal in bilingualism. It doesn't mean that that person is not bilingual. They are just bilingual in that particular topic or field or context. So they would be there on that continuum. But now a few words about who a beginner bilingual is. So I think it's a very useful concept. I first heard about it here in Britain because it's a very multicultural country, and we have a very strong system of support for bilingual children in schools. And many times we have a situation when a child who speaks a different language at home comes to school at the age of 4 or 5 and begins their education with zero English because they've just not encountered that language in their home or in their community. And already at that moment at school, they're being called a beginner bilingual because this recognizes the potential in those children that they um, will be living in a bilingual environment because they will have one language at home and one language at school. They will receive the support to catch up in English. They will straight away enter their educational system in English, and they will 99% chance they will become bilingual. And obviously, we've got many, many success stories how those children later on achieve in various exams even better than the monolingual children. So I think it's a very good, positive, optimistic way of looking at bilingualism when somebody has a potential to become bilingual, is receiving the right support, and we can already call them a beginner bilingual. So I would like you to ask yourself that question. Are you bilingual too? We will have a chance to discuss it later on. You can share your thoughts in the chat as well. I think that is useful. We'll go back to the chat at the end. But I'm hoping that after this introduction, I opened your thinking a little bit more, and that I will enable you to allow yourself to call yourself a bilingual, even if it's just a beginner bilingual, because a beginner bilingual or a receptive bilingual is already so much more than monolingual. So let's look at it in these positive ways. So some more important terms that I might use today or you might come across when you study this field is multilingualism. So I will mainly use the term bilingualism, but multilingualism is speaking more than two languages. And it's not a marginal phenomenon at all. Some statistics that I found tell us that 17% of the world population is multilingual. And I think multilingualism is the way forward because it's really a massive opportunity for us to develop more than two languages. And also it's easier if you already speak two languages, adding another language or another languages is easier for you. But in the world of science, when I speak about bilingualism, I will also include multilingualism in it. So bilingualism is like an umbrella term for us. Then we've got biculturalism or multiculturalism. So it's being able to experience and identify with two or more cultures. Very, very important and strongly connected to bilingualism. So that will be a great tool for us as well later on when I give you some ways in which you can enhance your language learning. Then we've got biliteracy or multiliteracy. So it's being able to read and write in the second or third language apart from your first language. Another very important tool because using reading and writing in a second language enables either children or adults to develop that language in speaking as well. So I think in this respect, Polish language, it's quite easy compared to other languages. So the Polish alphabet, even though it looks scary because it's got so many interesting signs in it, So it looks very big, but on the other hand, the whole system of reading and writing in Polish is actually easier than it is in other languages. And when I work with people who are bilingual, either kids or adults, they often refer to it. They say, "Oh, I didn't expect this. That it's so hard for me to speak Polish, but actually reading it or writing it is not so bad." So I can see some of you nodding. So you're agreeing, and I think this is something that we should use. So if it's easier, we should use it to our advantage, and we should develop it in our own time. Then we've got majority language. So this is their community language. So in my case, living in England, it would be English. So the language that is most commonly spoken in their community. And this is the language that is guaranteed. Here in the UK, we've got a very famous researcher of bilingualism at the University of Edinburgh, who's actually of Polish origin. He's called Thomas Bach, and he's a doctor, I think a psychiatrist by training. But he's devoted his career to researching bilingualism, how it works in the brain. He looks at how it delays dementia, for example. So a very, very important research. But he's quite well regarded here in Britain, and whenever there are any programs on television about it or on the radio. He's often invited. And I really like him because he's got a very good and brave way of speaking about his topic. And I listened to a program on BBC Radio with Professor Thomas Bach, and he was asked about minority language. Because many parents who have the opportunity of passing their language to their children don't do it because they are afraid that would make it more difficult for the children to learn the majority language. So in our case here in Britain, to learn English. And when the professor was asked about it, he looked a little bit annoyed. He looked a little bit frustrated with it because he must be asked that question a lot. And he's trying to get this message across that the majority language is more or less guaranteed. That even though, first of all, it might look like it's difficult, that the child is juggling those two languages. But in reality, for all ages, the majority language is given, is something that is guaranteed, providing there are no developmental challenges and so on. So to quote Professor Bach, he was asked about the majority language. So he answered that for a child who's growing up in England or in Britain, not to learn English, you would have to lock that child in a cupboard. So completely isolate from the outside world. So I think it speaks very directly about it, that there should be no worries about the majority language because it will take care of itself. I've already mentioned there's special programs in school that will give support to the majority language. But on the other hand, we've got the heritage language, so the home language, which should be in the center of our attention because this is the language that is in deficit. So a language that is not spoken but by such a wide group of people. So let's focus on heritage language. So the heritage language is quite a modern term, and it's again very inclusive. It's a term that is very positive and a term that motivates people to develop that language. That's why I think it's worth focusing on today. So a heritage language is a language that is learned and used in a family or community setting, often distinct from the dominant language of the society in which an individual lives. Heritage language speakers typically acquire the language informally in childhood, usually from parents or family members, but may not achieve full proficiency in this way, especially if their exposure is limited to certain contexts, such as home interactions. And this is already the first challenge that we have with heritage language, those limited contexts. But on the other hand, the first opportunity that comes with it is this language is often associated with cultural and familiar identity, connecting speakers to their ancestral or ethnic roots. And this is a huge advantage that a heritage language has compared to just a foreign language. So, for example, if I wanted to learn Korean now, I could. There are books, there are courses, there are apps available, and I could learn it to a very high degree. But my learning process would be more difficult because it's just a foreign language that I've got no emotional connection with. But heritage language offers you that connection, and it's something that we should definitely use. But because of those limited contexts, the heritage language learners may require specialized instruction, so special support to develop academic proficiency, because those skills will vary. Those contexts will vary. So we might be proficient in one area, but not in another. But to be able to use a language in a professional environment, we need to have those skills more wide. So we need to widen those skills. We need to bridge that gap. But obviously, it will still be easier than learning a language from scratch or learning a language that you are not connected to with your identity or with your heritage. So today we are focusing on speakers of Polish as a heritage language. So there are three characteristics in that group. First of all, it would be speakers exposed to Polish during childhood as a second language in the household. So not learning that language from books, like I did, first of all, but learning it in a natural environment. Second, they might not have had formal education or extensive practice in Polish. We've got representatives of Polish school today, and I'm very glad because Polish schools offer that opportunity. They offer that opportunity of an experience of formal education in the language and also offer those wider contexts of using the language. And the third characteristic of that group, they often possess passive understanding of Polish, so being able to receive the language and understand it from listening or from reading, but might struggle to use it in speaking or writing. So these characteristics we will challenge later on, and I will try and help and give some tips on how we can help that group. So what is it like to learn Polish if you've been previously exposed to it in childhood? So it is going to be a complex process because on one hand, we're going to have opportunities. So those advantages that I've already signaled, that would make it easier to learn Polish as a heritage language compared to learning it as a brand new, totally foreign language. And also we will deal with some challenges. So first of all, let's look at the bright side of things. So here are the opportunities of learning Polish as a heritage language, if you've already been exposed to it as a child. So we might be thinking about adults who remember their childhood, where they heard Polish or spoke Polish, or we might think into the future about our own children who might want to refresh or develop their Polish in the future, so they can use it to a higher efficiency. So first of all, in this group, many individuals will be able to understand the spoken Polish. So some people call it that they have an ear for the language, and it's something that is absolutely priceless. We will talk about it a bit later, further on. Then we've got the familiarity with Polish, which will make reacquisition of it less cognitively demanding, quicker, and often more enjoyable compared to a completely foreign or new language. And the result is very encouraging, and I think we should all use it. So for adults who were exposed to Polish in childhood, learning it later in life is generally easier compared to learning a completely new language. And I know my situation is not the same because I started learning my languages in primary school. So that would be over the age of 7. But still, I've tried going beyond bilingualism, so learning other languages. So I tried learning Spanish and I tried learning Italian, because they are the languages that I liked, and I heard they would be easy to learn, but they were not easy to learn. And then I remembered that at school I learned Russian and I learned German. So I thought, how about I learn these languages again now? And it is easier indeed. I can't remember exactly what I learned at school, but everything seems familiar. And I am achieving much faster progress learning these languages now because I have the experience of learning them in my childhood. So a very good way of sparking and maintaining your motivation is to remember about these opportunities. I can hear somebody wants to say something. Would it be okay that we have a discussion at the end? It's not long now. Yeah, okay. So please keep in mind what comments you've got and what you want to share, because I will give you the opportunity to do it at the end, and we can all learn from each other's experiences that way. So a little bit more detail about why it is easier for an adult to learn a language if they've been exposed to it as a child. So first of all, we've got the phonological familiarity. All of us are born with the ability to hear and distinguish all of the sounds of all of the languages in the world. This is why we can say that humans are naturally prepared to become multilingual. And this is what happens in many cultures, in many countries like India or like Indonesia, which is probably the most multilingual country in the world. But this ability of distinguish sounds will diminish with age. So first of all, we are prepared for all of these languages, but later on, if we are not using these languages, those areas in our brain will be taken over by other more important or more useful at the time, because we are simply not using those other languages. So those areas will be taken over. But those lasting impressions of hearing those sounds will stay with us. So the familiarity with the sound of the language will make learning pronunciation easier later on. So this is when we think about words that are very similar, like Kasia and Kasia, for example. So for someone who is learning Polish as a foreign language, starting as an adult, to them, those two words, Kasia and Kasia, might sound the same. And I don't blame them, because they are very, very similar words in sound. But they mean something totally different. One is a type of food, and one is a name for a girl. So Kasia is a name, and Kasia is something we eat. People who have been exposed to the sound of Polish as a child will find these listening activities easier. And also pronunciation will be easier, because pronunciation always starts with listening. Then we've got the receptive vocabulary and grammatical structures. So they, even if they are very limited, still they would leave a mark in the mind. So later on, it will be easier to recognize and remember the vocabulary and structures when you are refreshing that language. Then we've got memory and neural pathways. This is a very exciting area of the science of bilingualism, because we've got many, many more tools to look inside the bilingual brain. And now we know that the exposure to a language in childhood would activate the neural pathways associated with that language, and that those pathways will remain partially active or easier to reactivate later in life. So this means that, again, reactivating them will be easier. And then we've got something that is last here on the list, but is probably the most important. So it's the cultural and emotional connection. So this is what you gained by speaking that language at home. So this helps with the identity, makes the culture more familiar, and this will enhance the motivation, engagement, and it will never be that Korean that I mentioned in my example earlier on. It will be a language that is special to your heart. And this is why learning it is a completely different experience. So that was all positives, but we need to have a look at some challenges as well. So we're looking at our learner of Polish as a heritage language, and they will expect, but they might not have them all, but they might come across two different kinds of challenges. First of all, it's challenges of learning a heritage language, and it doesn't matter what language it is. So any language learned at home or experienced at home would provide these challenges. And then we've got challenges of learning Polish specifically. So learning Polish, so the specificity of Polish as a language, as a Slavic language in particular, will present some challenges here. So first of all, we'll have a look at challenges of learning any heritage language. So first of all, we've got the limited vocabulary range. So because it was primarily spoken at home, the vocabulary will be limited to everyday or familiar contexts. So it's been proven that at home in our families, we recycle about 1,000 words. So that's really not a lot, because we speak about what we want for dinner, when are we going shopping? We speak about, oh, whether we should go to the park or to the beach, whether we should schedule our holiday in July or in August. And we repeat and recycle the same topics. And this limits the vocabulary. So we might seem proficient in a language, but if anyone puts us in an academic or professional environment in that language, we will struggle. So this is why this presents a vocabulary challenge, that we need to widen that vocabulary, go outside of that comfort zone, which is our family language. Then we've got the passive understanding and limited speaking ability. So this is a challenge. This is how we have to activate what is lying dormant in our brain to be able to maintain conversations, especially if the contexts are more complex on the side of the grammar. And then the third challenge is the interference from the dominant language, because we are already functioning in the majority language, the majority of the time. As adults, we've been doing it for many years. We will have that language as our dominant language. So the dominance could be so strong that it will unintentionally affect our heritage language. So we will translate certain structures. We will have a so-called foreign accent when we speak the heritage language. So these errors will be an obstacle in communication, basically. So I work with students on interference a lot. And I think it's very important when you learn, when you try and learn another language, whether it's a heritage language or a foreign language, to compare the languages. So comparing and contrasting languages, for example, what I do on an everyday basis, Polish and English, it gives you a very effective tool in dealing with these interferences. So, for example, I'm teaching a young man in his 20s who grew up in Germany, but his mum's Polish. So he's always spoken Polish to his mum, and he speaks German to his dad and to a whole wide community. But now he's in his 20s, and he feels that gap. He feels he wants to develop his Polish further, and it's very cute how he speaks about his Polish. He says that him and his mum are twisting the languages. So he says zakręca języki. So that means that they mix the languages a lot, and that's also quite common in bilingual people. But we had to work quite a lot on how to describe using tools in Polish, because he kept making the same mistake, saying, for example, I'm writing with a pen. So in Polish, we've got a special case that to use when we speak about tools. So we don't need that with, but he was translating it to Polish, saying, piszę z długopisem. But that in Polish, that is not, one is that not correct, and two is misleading, because that construction we would use to say that I'm writing in the company of someone. So I'm writing with another person. So we're writing together, for example, or we're playing with a toy. That's how we say in English. But in Polish, we would not say with a toy. I would say I'm playing a toy, but I can say I'm playing a toy with a friend. So it's a very confusing way how the two languages, and I know it's between English and German and Norwegian and Polish, so it's a feature in many languages, and it's an example of an interference. So not in every lesson of Polish as a foreign language you would have it. This is why it's a special feature of bilingual teaching. So now we'll have a look at specific challenges of learning Polish as a Slavic language. So it will possess special, unique features that will be difficult for learners whose primary language is not Slavic. So because the language is different, it operates in different ways when it comes to the whole system of cases, the whole way the word order is, for example. So that will be very different from other languages. On top of it, the phonology, so the sounds of the language, that would be very different from many other languages. So that would create a specific challenge. So how can we deal with it? Pronunciation exercises. When it comes to the interference in the terms of pronunciation, we should start with listening exercises on minimal pairs. So this is something that is extremely effective when it comes to heritage speakers, because we will be refreshing these sounds. But then again, I said about contrasting between the two languages, but this is contrasting within the same language, like two words in a minimal pair that means something totally different, but the difference in sound is minimal. So there will be only one feature of one sound that is different, like in our example of Kasia, a girl, and Kasia, something to eat. We've got loads and loads of pairs like this, and you can even buy sets of pictures that would help you practice those pairs. And this is the very first and most effective step to improve your pronunciation. First of all, improve your listening skills. And you will be refreshing it anyway. So this is very important, that it will be easier compared to a learner of a foreign language. Second of all is the differences between everyday and formal language. So compared to other languages, in Polish, there are many significant differences between the formal register of the language and the informal. What you would have at home is mainly informal because everybody knows each other, everyone is very close. So, for example, you would be using the direct forms of address. But if you go outside of your home, even speaking to your neighbor, you would have to use the more formal ways of address. And heritage speakers of Polish would have to bridge this gap. They would have to expose themselves to the formal Polish, reading news articles, engaging in exercises that would familiarize with that formal register of the language. And it's actually very important. It's not something that should be marginalized because it affects the way you are perceived, and the way you create your image when you use the language. So an important point. And then we've got a challenge of maintaining motivation, because Polish has these specific challenges, being a language that is different, that is Slavic, that operates in a different way. Many people would experience greater frustration, or they would be discouraged at some point. So this is where we go back to cultural exploration. So you will be actively using your language, but at the same time having fun. So using the language as a form of entertaining. So you would be attending cultural events, you would be reading books, you would be watching films, and so on. So you would be using the cultural resources of that language and of that country, but at the same time learning it. So I think this is 2-in-1, a perfect combination. So for some learners who are discouraged and frustrated, I would say don't give up the language. the language lessons as such, but immerse yourself more in the culture. So think about connecting bilingualism and biculturalism together. So even if you have a break from the lessons, carry on with the culture, and I will assure you, you will go back to the lessons. So to sum up, 3 most effective strategies for adults learning Polish as a heritage language are connecting language with culture. So that would be engaging with Polish history, traditions, music, and literature. So that will deepen your understanding and make the language feel more personal. Number 2 is practical communication exercises. So if you have that passive knowledge of Polish, to bring it back to life, the best and most effective would be practical scenario-based language activities. And that would boost your confidence using the language as well. And then we've got activities like role playing, and for example, that we could use that for practicing that formal language. If you put yourself in that kind of scenario that you have to speak to someone at the checkout, that you speak to your neighbor to start with, and then you speak to your future employer during a job interview, what kind of different vocabulary you would use, how differently you would structure your dialogue in those more formal contexts. And then working with instructors in heritage language learning. So that would be going beyond learning Polish as a foreign language, thinking about these opportunities of heritage language learning. And I will give you an example, because I consider myself as an instructor of Polish as a heritage language. So I'll give you one example of another student that I had who learned Polish as a child, and later in life felt that there was that piece of him that was missing, and he wanted to go back to Polish. And that's a very common experience. So we started using materials that are designed for adults, because that was an adult, and we started refreshing that language. But then we came to a particular area where that student needed support, and I couldn't find any materials dedicated to adults. So I said, I apologize. I know you're an adult, but we need to work on some materials that are designed for kids, because this will help you, because it will have that that area of language covered that we need. And that person came back to life because they said, this brings back memories, because this is the kind of pictures that I would see in kids' picture books with my mom, with my grandma. And this brought these memories, these positive emotions. And that student asked, can we use more materials designed for kids in the future? Because this brings back such positive memories. This refreshes those neural pathways that I was talking about in such a way that I want more of it. And we did. We used more kids' songs, rhymes, and so on. And that was really helpful for that student. So this is an example of how we can use the experience of an instructor like this. So conclusion is, what I would really like you to take away with you home from today's talk is remembering that bilingualism opens doors to different cultures, perspective, and ways of thinking. So I would like you to think not bi, but multi, okay? So first of all, we want to learn our second language or relearn our heritage language, but this will open doors to more and more languages and more cultures in the future. Learning Polish connects you with Polish heritage and family roots and fosters personal growth. So think about filling that gap that is missing. And it's amazing how it will let you know about that gap earlier or later in life. I will use an example of another student who whose origin was Polish, but they never heard Polish at home. So later on in life, when they were about 40, they felt there was that piece of them missing, even though they never heard Polish at home. But they knew their heritage was Polish and they came from Poland. They had Poland in their DNA, basically. And they felt that gap still, and they wanted to learn the language. So it's something that is worth remembering. Then we've got the awareness of the opportunities, challenges, and strategies in learning Polish as a heritage language. So what I was trying to share with you today, think positively that it's much easier for you, but at the same time, be aware of the challenges. Embrace a practical and culturally enriched approach to language learning. So think about being practical, think wide, not just closing ourselves in that idealistic approach to bilingualism, and think about the culture, how it could be a great ally. Last but not least, enjoy the process, because not just the final result is important. And remind yourself that bilingualism is a journey worth pursuing for the growth and opportunities it offers to you and the whole family. So that's another point. Don't just think about yourself. This will enrich people around you as well. So thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we could now share the challenges and experiences that you've got.
We have a question on our chat. There is a lady asking, what's the phenomena of losing the language by the second generation? Meaning maybe she means maybe grandchildren of Polish comers, and grandchildren through probably their parents. On this line, there was some gap
Yes.
that resulted in lacking this language, meaning that the heritage language disappears. If you could maybe elaborate on that.
So I think here, if we've not had the experience that of the language, because this is another generation, so it's going down the family tree, we would still have, even though we've not had the experience of hearing the language, but in many cases, we would still have the cultural experience. So in many homes, even if the language is neglected, their cooking would still be there, their family stories would still be there, passed on in it, obviously in a different language. So the sense of identity and those roots would still be there. Okay, so the analogy to the heritage language would still be there, but what we wouldn't have those advantages of actually of having those neural pathways and those phonological memories of the sounds of the language. So that would be one thing that is missing, but the whole connection, emotional connection, and so on, it would still be there.
We have one person that would like to ask a question, Mr. Dan Ophir, and then Idan. Okay.
Yes.
Hello, Aiden.
Hi. My name is Dr. Dan Ophir. I'm a lecturer in computer science. I have given a lecture about my childhood in which I would like to show you one slide. Please give me to be a host, and I will be able to show you what I mean.
Just a second. Here you go.
Okay. I have found a similarity between our hymnons. Let's see the Polish version. Marsz, marsz Dąbrowski, z ziemi włoskiej do Polski. And we have here Hatikva. And what we have in Hatikva, something similar. Not exactly, but we can say marsz, marsz Herzl, z ziemi diaspora do ziemi obiecanej. And here, I would like to show you a stamp what was published in Israel due our Polish and Israel similarities. 70 years, opposite 100 years. Okay, that's what I wanted to mention for the time being.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. And now a question from Idan, please.
I would like to ask about when you talked about the advantages of learning a heritage language. Now you said that one advantage is the reacquisition of the learning of the language learned. For example, reacquiring the vocabulary and the syntax, the rules of a language. Now, my question is, the reacquisition is also relevant for beginner bilinguals. For example, I can tell you, let's say my grandma, she was a beginner bilingual because she only talked at home the other language. Now, if she wants to learn the language better, will the reacquisition be relevant if she wants to make the second language better? Because she never had it, so it's not a reacquisition.
No. If she's it would depend on how much exposure she had. So if you've had any exposure, so even if you overheard it, for example, it's a well-known example, if you overheard it, a language being spoken between parents, if the parents have their own language that they would speak together, and they never speak that language, use that language to speak to the child, but the child would still hear the language between parents, and that they would have a certain amount of exposure that way. But if somebody never heard a language, they would not be learning it. They would be learning it from the beginning.
I mean, she talked German, but it doesn't matter. You said it's relevant for any language. She talked German at home, but only about household manners.
Yes.
Now, if she wants to learn German for an academic level,
yes,
is there some sort of a reacquisition, or it's just like any other bicultural person to learn better?
Yes, that would be not as much a reacquisition, but that would be developing that language which was present in the family, in the conversations about the familiar topics. So obviously using the grammar that was already there, but maybe simpler structures and simpler vocabulary, and that would be widening it. So building on the foundation from home into the academic contexts and so on. So that wouldn't be reacquisition. Reacquisition would be when somebody used to use a language, stopped, and they thought they lost it, but they didn't lose it completely. They just think they forgot it, and they are learning it again.
In that case, so it's just like any other language learning. from a certain level.
No, it wouldn't be like any other learning because you've got the basis from home. So it would be easier than any other learning.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your interesting question.
Do we have some more questions, please? If you could raise your hand, virtual hand, it would be easier for us to see. We have a question from Esther. She says that I didn't understand why learning Polish for kids, it's different than learning any other foreign language. I mean, she means, I think, a child that heard Polish at home, right? I think.
I never said that learning Polish for children is different from learning any different language. I was mainly focusing on adults. So just to clarify, I said that the adults who experienced Polish as children later on in life, when they are learning or relearning Polish as adults, it will be different from learning another language, foreign language. But when it comes to children, when they are little, they are equally able to learn Polish, and same as any other language.
Yes, Mr. Dan Ophir again wanted to ask something. You need to turn on your microphone. Microphone, you need to turn on your microphone. Maybe I will help you.
Okay, thank you. I think that you are a bilingual person, but knowing Polish and Hebrew. Maybe you will speak something about your experience. What do you think?
Yeah, I like Dr. Aneta Nott-Bower. I'm also a mother of bilingual kids, so I can really also share this challenge of an exposure. Basically, I think as a mother, I have a challenge of exposure. I think we all have when there is another language dominant, a language of surroundings, a language of dad, and then it's me, a lonely island in front of the surroundings. So this is the challenge, I think, that we all deal with.
Thank you very much.
When my child turns to me in Polish and calls me mamusiu, also the right declination, it's worth it.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's priceless.
Okay, do we have some more questions?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry that my camera doesn't work. So I'm aware. I would like to ask if there will be any continuing lecture following this one, or it's a one-time lecture.
Yes, there will be a continuation. I was waiting to the end of the lecture to tell you that next month on the 13th of December at the same time at 11, we're going to have a Zoom lecture, this time in Polish. It will be English. And the lecture will be about one thing that Dr. Aneta also spoke now, about learning Polish through culture. Dr. Michał Pruszak from Gdańsk University will teach you about how you can improve your Polish and scope of your vocabulary through learning through the culture, movies, literature, music, etc. So I think it will be interesting. Dr. Michał Pruszak is also a Polish teacher for foreigners, so he knows the challenges, so he will speak in a way that it will be understandable to all of you that also speak Polish, maybe not on a very high level, but also for Polish learners. So it will be next month.
It's free. We can get invitation.
Yes.
Cudne. And the second question is if this recorded video will be also seen. I can share it with some friends.
We will publish it on our Polish Institute's YouTube profile, so you can find it.
Okay.
Okay.
And the last one is, I hope that we can later meet in Poland and practice in reality there. Okay, thanks.
Okay, if there are no more questions, so we would like to say thank you, Dr. Aneta Nott-Bower, for a fascinating lecture.
Thank you very much for all of you for all of your questions and very interesting comments. I've been going through them here. So thank you for being such active listeners. I have a question for you at the end as well. What was the most interesting part of what I said today? So I can learn as well for my future lectures. If anyone would like to either say or write in the chat, so I could improve for the future as well and know what actually managed to hit the needs in this topic.
It was perfect.
Thank you.
For me, as heritage speaker of Polish, it showed exactly what I went through my life.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So you enjoyed hearing the opportunities, I hope, and the good points of it. So I'd like to concentrate on that. You can, if anyone wants to develop their understanding of bilingualism anymore, you can find me under Bilingual House on social media or my website. So we can connect through there. It's a great place where everyone interested in the topic can share and stay up to date. It's in Polish, but I think that would be good for you as well.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.